The literature of exploration is tied to the discovery of the New World by European nations is vast and contains literatures of many nations. It is, of course, not even truly a discovery. After all, people already lived here, and there is solid evidence that people from many different nations and continents had made contact with the Americas before. We know that even Western Europeans had been to the continent earlier than Columbus, arriving with Leif Erikson as shown on this map, a Viking explorer who led his people to Newfoundland, where there was a short-lived Norse colonization attempt. They called it Vineland. Rather, this is the time that the discovery took. The European discovery with Columbus is the time the discovery took, if you will, leading to mass travel between the European continent on one side and North and South America on the other. We have letters of Columbus, the accounts of Amerigo Vespucci, the various tales and documents from the Spanish conquistadores, and, of course, we have the records of Jamestown and Plymouth, the first two major English colonies, founded within 20 years of each other in Virginia and Massachusetts, respectively, and the many colonies that followed them. Still, prior to those, you have the Spanish in St. Augustine, and within a little while, you have the French in New Orleans, followed by Spanish in New Orleans. You have New Amsterdam, which was Dutch, and even amongst these many, many colonies, you have Plymouth Bay. You have Jamestown, which was primarily a business enterprise. You have Pennsylvania, settled by Quakers, who were so far outside the religious norm that even the separatists in New England wanted those that were participating in this religion arrested and deported. These colonies proved a great variety from the beginning. Virginia was founded by businessmen seeking the wealth in North America that Spain had found from South America to Mexico. The Plymouth Colony famously came as religious separatists, fleeing first to Holland and then further to the American wilderness. Maryland was established as a haven for Catholics, Pennsylvania for the Quakers. Georgia was initially settled largely by recruits among nonviolent offenders in British jails, creating an alternative, according to its founder, James Oglethorpe, for Britain's worthy poor to the crowded debtors' prisons at use in England at that time. There were also many undesirables in Great Britain sentenced to transportation to various southern colonies. Point being that an entire unit of great depth, length, and variety could be created focusing on just this area. After all of these various communities would influence what would become the United States. Spanish influence may have proven to be limited in the original 13 colonies, but it was prevalent in Florida, Louisiana, along with the French, and of course Texas in the American Southwest. The French continued to influence events and to settle throughout the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, and again, especially in Louisiana. To ignore their writings is certainly to choose to be incomplete in recording the literature of exploration. However, as limited as our space and time is, I feel obliged to choose only two emblematic accounts that relate directly to what would become the United States proper and that represent the two major cultural groups that would join the Native Americans as the dominant three in the formation of the initial 13-state United States of America, the British and African slaves. Classic exploration-era text from British settled America, and the one that speaks most to our national mythos, is William Bradford's Of Plymouth Plantation. Bradford was a governor of the Plymouth Bay Colony and later recorded the arrival of the Pilgrims in Massachusetts, their initial view of the land as a terrifying wilderness, and their initial encounters with natives, both positive and negative. And while there are many slave narratives that recount the horrors of that experience and of the Middle Passage, perhaps none is so famous as that of Olaudah Equiano, a man captured inland in Africa as a youth, sold from hand to hand until he arrived at the coast, where he was sold to British slavers, and who then remained a slave for years in America and on a British naval vessel. Eventually winning his freedom, Equiano became a powerful force in the abolitionist movement in Great Britain, a personal companion and friend to William Wilberforce in the efforts to end the slave trade and the continuing efforts to end slavery.